Hi, I'm Leo and I'm the artistic director of Virtually Opera and writer of We Sing, I Sang, a sci-fi ritual opera. Today what I really want to talk about are some of the influences going into the show because fundamentally it's always good to acknowledge where you're coming from. Operatically, Akhenaten, Peleus and Melisande, I'm more thinking about the structural and conceptual ideas going into the piece today. Particularly what I want to talk about is science fiction. We're calling it a sci-fi ritual opera because it is about an abstract kind of futuristic thing. It is very definitely a piece about a collective consciousness, what you might call a hive mind, going out into the stars and then reflecting on what has happened. What leads a people to bring themselves together into a massive collective consciousness. And obviously that is influenced by science fiction in lots of ways, particularly the ideas of Ursula Le Guin. But you should read some Ursula Le Guin. Also you may want to start with The Word for World is Forest, which is absolutely one of my favourite books of all time. There's a wonderful essay she wrote called A Genre, a Word Only a Frenchman Could Love. In it she acknowledges that the concept of genre is valid, that it's useful for identifying different kinds of narrative fiction, but also that, particularly when it comes to the siloing of science fiction and fantasy, a genre label on a book is usually an appeal to a safe but limited audience. You'll notice, for example, that Salman Rushdie, in Midnight's Children, that's called magical realism, not fantasy. However, it's quite hard to see how magical realism isn't more or less just a form of fantasy that is more socially acceptable. For her, science fiction is not just Star Wars, it's not just spaceships flying around shooting each other. You can use it, and she does use it. Oh my god, she uses it for very interesting conceptions of what other worlds could be like, what other imagined societies could you have. What I'm mostly thinking about, for example, is The Dispossessed, in which she goes beyond that framework of science fiction is only about technology. Instead, she uses it to imagine possible societies. In this one, The Dispossessed, what she's talking about is how could an anarchist society actually work, and what issues would there be? When you start imagining other societies, you can expand the possibilities of what you think our society could be. One really interesting book, Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie, that is a story about what happens if you have a ship with an artificial intelligence on it, and then it breaks, and it has to download its entire mind and mental processes into an individual unit of the humans it uses to organise itself, who are all enslaved to the artificial intelligence. And that idea of how do collective consciousnesses relate to individual minds was really interesting. We Sing, I Sang is about what happens if you have this community of people on an Earth-like planet having a crisis so terrible that they form a collective consciousness, put all their minds into that and just start going out across the stars. What can they do that they couldn't do before, and what can't they do that they miss? And how do they deal with the horrors of the crisis and what they did? What that ends up being is a very useful framework within which the audience and the artist can explore what is the balance we want to strike between the collective and the individual. Because we start to see an individual voice within the mind coming out of it. If the individual voice is coming out of the mind, do we as an audience want it to be an individual even though it isn't necessarily so good as the collective mind? We live in an age of many crises. Crises of democracy, crises of climate. It is the hottest day of the year, I apologise for the sweat. And crises of lots of world systems breaking, which is horrible. And that's something I'll be talking about in a future video, how this piece was informed by ideas about sustainability and what should the future of opera be in a time of environmental crisis. And because the audience can contribute, hopefully we can see how they respond to that society. But for now, I'm aware I've been talking for quite a long time, so thank you for listening. Hope if this has been interesting to you, and go and read some Ursula Le Guin.